Yeah.
So, Susan, often when you come on the show, and I would say more often than not, I think at this point, you and I, or you have picked the things that we're talking about, or you've programmed it, right? I want to say for the most part, last year, when we did our bonus episodes, because I don't think we did any mainline episodes together. We just did we did all those bonus episodes throughout the year. Those kind of came out of working together on your show, right? Where you're that idea with you and Sharon initially.
Yes, we were talking about 9 to 5, the TV show, and the movie. That led us to the movie, and then the movie led us to all those amazing stars. And so we were talking, and then inevitably you and I get on the phone to talk business, and we end up chit-chatting we talk business for about 10, 15 minutes, and then suddenly we're like, well, have you seen this movie? Have you seen that movie? What about this movie?
And it's always shocking to everyone what I've never seen, because I go, no, I've never seen this. And you're like, oh my God, you've never seen this. And then it's like 5 minutes later into the conversation, it's like, you've never seen this either. Because I want to say, initially when we were having our conversation, catching up after the holidays, you were like, you've never seen The Music Man, which I feel like I should have seen before this movie for the specific and obvious reason of Robert Preston and Blake Edwards, obviously. But I still haven't. And it's not because I didn't want to, but it's because I didn't want that to influence my feelings on the role that Robert Preston plays so well in this movie. But when you were like, oh, what could we do as kind of a bonus? Victor Victoria came up, which I had never even heard of. So, consider me uninitiated already.
Well, I mean, you clearly you've got to go through the Blake Edwards catalog, I believe. So, this one, again, I remember being such a gem, and it came out in 1982. It was Julie Andrews and James Garner and Robert Preston, and it was just a delightful film for that period of time.
Well, and that's the thing. It's there's interesting gender and sexual politics in this movie that I feel like for the two of us may have the more interesting conversation at the core of this, because this is a very progressive movie for 1982. I feel like maybe not the most progressive. I mean, James Garner does say fag, and then another character does say faggot, but I feel like within the scope of the movie, I mean, I get it. And again, as someone who is identifies as bisexual themselves, like, I get it. Like, I understand what the need is for using that, and it makes sense. But it definitely made me think of watching prep school movies back in like 2022, where every single Boston prep school movie, they were just dropping it like it was nobody's business. So here it's used to a little bit more specific effect in the moments that it's used. But like Susan and I have been mentioning, I am still the host of the Culture Cast, Chris Stashew. I am joined by one of the two hosts of 80s TV Ladies, Susan Lambert.
Hi.
And like we've kind of mentioned, Susan and I are going to be talking about a movie that I didn't initially expect to cover this month. This month's programming has kind of gone all over the place, which I'm okay with, because still haven't seen any of the movies that we're talking about before. But on this episode, we're taking a little diversion into a film directed by Blake Edwards, like we've already mentioned, from 1982, called Victor Victoria.
Is this woman really a man pretending to be a woman? Or is this woman really a woman pretending to be a man pretending to be a woman? And why is this man, who is all man, in love with this man, unless he knows that this man is really a woman pretending to be a man pretending to be a woman?
I don't care if you are a man.
Blake Edwards' Victor Victoria, the disguised surprise comedy hit of the year, rated PG. Special advance preview this Friday. Check newspapers for a theater near you.
So it's directed by Blake Edwards, written by Blake Edwards, but it's based off of the original German film from 1933 of the same name, Victor and Victoria. And this one stars Julie Andrews as the titular Victoria, a soprano who's down on her luck, who meets a gay man who's also down on his luck. And the gay man goes, well, you know what would be funny? If you were crazy as shit, frankly, if you were a female impersonator, so you are playing a man playing a woman. And that is the premise of the movie, and where it goes from there is actually a lot more shocking to me than I was expecting, again, just given when the movie came out and the gender and sexual politics of the time. But Yeah, like I mentioned, this was not originally on the programming, but I'm excited to talk about it with you, Susan. So why are we talking about this movie? And tell me a little bit about your history with it.
So we're talking about the movie because we were talking about 80s movies with female leads, and the first one that popped to mind was this movie, and I thought I was like, oh, well, the gender politics were really interesting for 1982,
right?
And so I was very curious how it was going to hold up because I've seen it since it came out, but it had been a while, and as I was discussing with Sharon the other day on 80s TV Ladies, the gender politics and LGBTQ language is evolving so quickly, and that what was what was groundbreaking and or cool to say 5 years ago may not be now,
right?
And so it was just sort of interesting in light of that to me. So I have seen this film a couple of times because I love the performances in it. I think Julie Andrews is amazing in it. I think Robert Preston is amazing in it. And I think James Garner is amazing in it. And I think Leslie Ann Warren is delightful. It isn't as well structured as I thought it was.
That's a nice way of putting it. There is maybe one glaring issue with this movie.
Well, there's a couple for me as a writer. And what I did not know, I think I sort of vaguely know there was some sort of, original context to the movie, but I didn't know that it was directly based on the 1933 German musical comedy called Victor and Victoria, und Victoria.
Right.
And is got a lot of very similar elements. I mean, they basically remade this film, and it's been remade, I guess, several times. And that film, I haven't seen the whole thing, but I saw clips of it. I was like, I got to go see clips of this. And it's like surprisingly amazing.
Right.
With its gender politics, and you think about the 30s and Germany in the 30s, and again, how that push forward to fall back of all of our politics, right? But that was so I was delighted to revisit it with you, and then your second part. Did I like it? Is that what it was?
You're kind of experienced with the movie. I mean, why? I mean, you kind of already mentioned why we're talking about it, but what did you think rewatching it this time?
I thought, again, some parts were just, it's just an enjoyable movie to watch for me. I love those actors and I'll watch them. I love the twists and the turns in it. The tone shifts dramatically. So the tone is very much, but I think at the time we were more used to the Blake Edwards. Blake Edwards was such an amazing filmmaker who did really, films that we think of today, Breakfast at Tiffany's, The Great Race, Victor Victoria, 10. But he also did a movie called The Days of Wine and Roses, which was a drama. And then he was hugely successful doing the Pink Panther films.
Which I feel like there's some of that here.
And that's the thing. I think he could never resist being a goofball.
Nope.
And just having wacky, farcical comedy that just was kind of in a completely separate movie than anything else he was making. And that definitely happens here. What's funny is some of that is definitely in the 1933 movie. The whole detective chasing down and that subplot is very, again, it's in there. And so and the detective is played for a complete goofball.
Right.
In the clips I saw, and I did not see the whole movie, but I, again, just enjoy the heck out of that film. I think the songs are wonderful. I love the relationship between Robert Preston and Julie Andrews' characters in the movie. And the big disappointment is that that sort of ends about midway through the movie, and the James Garner Julie Andrews relationship takes precedent, and you still want some more I want more with them and more resolution for them, although the big number at the end with Robert Preston is pretty fun.
So, like we've already mentioned, I'd never seen this before. I've actually, again, I haven't seen a lot of Julie Andrews' stuff either. I'll just say it right here. Again, I don't care. Go judge me if you like. I've never seen The Sound of Music. It's not something that's motivated me. And it's the premise alone doesn't sound particularly.
Mary Poppins? Did you see Mary Poppins? Oh my!
As a kid, I might have seen it once. Like again, that's the thing. Like the stuff that the things that I've seen Julie Andrews in. You're gonna love this. The Princess Diaries.
The Princess Diaries.
I've seen.
I worked on those. I worked on those at Disney.
And you know what? Like those are good movies. Like those are great films. Like it's not even like, oh, that's not something worth mentioning. Like, no, Julie Andrews is fantastic in everything she's essentially ever been in. I'm pretty convinced. I was actually just recently rewatching Shrek, and then Shrek 2, which she plays Fiona's mother in Shrek.
Oh, right. I was like, who does she play in that?
Yeah. Which, and again, like in a lot of ways, for me, the way I kind of feel about Julie Andrews is similar to the way I feel about Angela Lansbury. She had like a big impact on a lot of like things that I've seen as a young adult, but not so much as an adult. Like I said, never seen Sound of Music. This is the first Julie Andrews thing I've really ever seen, to be perfectly honest with you. And boy, I don't want it to be the only Julie Andrews thing I've ever seen, because she's fantastic. Obviously, it's like, no shit, Chris, she's fantastic. But I mean,
I wasn't gonna say.
Yeah, I'll say it to myself. It's fine. Like, and that's the thing. Like, it's apparent from the moment she's on screen why she is not only the lead in this on film, but also was the lead on stage as well. And that's the thing, you know. We kind of mentioned this month already with Cats 2019, a cinematic abomination. If you're gonna do a screen adaptation of a stage play, the people that are already doing it on stage probably warrant a little bit more attention for the screen version than just casting some actor and trying to get them to sing. Again, I like Sweeney Todd as much as the next Tim Burton fan, but the singing in that movie is not great. And I've seen it on stage, and it was fantastic because, again, that's the job of the people on stage, is to be good at singing, and they are also good at acting. And then choreography. People look down on musicals, but like, if you're an actor on stage, you have to be a triple threat. Like you have to be able to do everything. I'm not saying actors on film don't, but it's different. And again, like, you have two people in this movie, Robert Preston and Julie Andrews, who are immensely talented musically. So you have the right people here, and that helps. Are there some parts of this movie that are a little odd? Yeah, primarily in like the pacing of the movie, it's off. It's really off. And it's not even like, oh, this is a musical and it's off. It's just, there are scenes that just kind of end. I think is the way I would put it, like very abrupt editing choices. And it kind of makes for a disjointed second act. I feel like the second act of this movie is just all over the place. And to your point, the moment we kind of have Julie Andrews and Robert Preston get separated, the movie starts to suffer. And I'm not saying I don't like James Garner in the movie, but I like Robert Preston and Julie Andrews back and forth a hell of a lot more, because James Garner's character, how do I say this?
He's a gangster.
Yeah, I don't understand the way his character's portrayal continues on throughout the movie, because at the beginning it's like, okay, he is in love with her because he thinks that she's a woman, and then she does the act and reveals that she's pretending to be a man, pretending to be a woman, and it freaks him out. But it doesn't seem to faze him to the point of not wanting to do anything, because then he starts to say like, oh, there's this, I would think like one of the biggest scenes in this movie is where he's, kisses her even though he thinks she's a man. And he's like, I don't care that you're a man. And like, what? But like the movie does that, and then it kind of walks it back immediately.
Well, here's the thing. It walked it back for that scene. So they actually, the scene where he sneaks in and sees her. I think the scene where he snuck in was there, but I don't think he was able to see her.
I assume so as well.
And yet they changed it. They added that he saw her and knew that she was a woman. And that was Blake Edwards, and he has said that he chickened out, that the original plan was for when they run away together, he does not know. He still does not know if she's a man or a woman, and they run away, and he says, he says, I don't care if you're a man, and kisses her, and then she says, I am a man, and he says, I still don't care. And that if the character had not known for sure that she was a woman, that would have been insanely even greater than it already is. It's a beautiful scene, but it really is undercut by him knowing, even though he knows,
but it's left ambiguous. It's left ambiguous enough.
It's not. Yes, it's not direct, but he knows that he sees her and then smiles, and
yeah. So that was my interpretation as well. Is like he sees her and smiles, and I'm assuming he saw her breasts has got to be what it is. Like, and it's like, okay. And like, that's what I was talking about with some of the weird editing choices. Cause that for me, it's a total fucking cop out. Like it's the most cop out of cop outs. And I mean, I get it. And again, I understand that this movie is really doing something that you would not expect at the time. And you might not even expect now in a lot of ways. Cause I think this could be something fun to come back like this play on a readaptation or a retelling in a more modern setting. I don't know if it would, it would be different, but
yeah, the politics are so different. The sexual politics for men and women are so different that you would have to do it in a very different way. The idea is still really kind of fun, but at the same time, then if you do it for real and you do it in a modern setting, you're also talking about literally co-opting drag queens, worlds. And you're like, wait, is she, but for the time, there were a couple things that struck me on rewatching it. Just the very opening of the movie. Robert Preston is a movie star. His most beloved part is the music man, arguably the most wholesome, even though he's a con man, but for Americana world, the most wholesome, actor in America.
A wholesome con man.
A wholesome con man, exactly. And the first shot is Robert Preston waking up and then a guy getting, his lover literally sitting up behind him. And that alone is just like insane, right? You're like, we're putting this actor and we're going, guess what? The music man is gay.
Right.
And you're like, what? For an audience. And again, they were able to accept it, I think, in a Blake Edwards film because they knew that it was a musical comedy.
Right.
But at the same time, it was also incredibly bold to open the movie that way, and I thought so beautiful to open the movie with him being kind of a bitter person, right?
Yeah.
He's a bit, he's sort of paying his lover, and his lover is a real jerk, and he is bitter and dark about love and friendship, and then when Julie Andrews and he befriend each other, that helps both of them. And that relationship is so incredibly charming that you want that to be, and that's the story. The story based on the opening is his story as much as it's her story. And then it becomes the James Garner, Julie Andrews show, which is wonderful. It's fun to watch them. It's fun to watch them have an adult conversation about their situation when all the chips are out there. But I think it's much more interesting if instead of concentrating on the number of times that apparently James Garner had to go get beat up in order to prove his manhood. I think we got it the first time.
Yeah. Right? Or the second. I got it the second. Or the third.
It took you the second.
Or the third even.
But in America in 1982, they needed that. They needed to continue to prove that James Garner was going to prove his manhood for whatever reason. Because men are very fragile.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, for all the fragility that men project onto women, I find men to be a lot more fragile than any woman I've ever met.
Yes.
And I will say, like, Robert Preston, as someone who identifies as bisexual, as someone who's gay, I appreciate the role that he's playing. It is not a stereotype. Like it is far from a stereotype. It is a fully realized gay man in a musical, and I appreciated that it's not really ever played for, look at the big queen. Like, if it is, he's the one doing it, which is perfectly fine. And I have friends that act that same way, so I get it. Like, if it were someone else doing it, it's a different story. And there are, again, kind of derogatory moments in the movie that are played not for laughs, but for shock value, especially kind of towards the, second and third act of the movie. But as much as I like Julie Andrews in this movie, I mean, Robert Preston, just every scene that he's in, he's just so good. And the movie suffers when he's not in it. Like genuinely, when him and Julie Andrews are not on screen together, it suffers. But when he's not on screen, it suffers because he's just as good as she is. I mean, again, it's as much his story as it is hers. And the movie kind of forgets that 2/3 of the way through, which is unfortunate because, again, I find it even more interesting. Mongo like Candy. I mean, Alex Karras is in this movie, who plays Mongo in Blazing Saddles. And in this movie, he plays Robert Preston's gay lover, who comes out 2/3 of the way through the movie. And again, you expect that that's going to be played for laughs. And it's really not. It's actually kind of, again, more progressive than I was expecting, because not only does the Alex Karras character, who is a former football player, and again, that speaks to the real person Alex Karras as well, is a closeted gay man, and we don't just get one scene of them talking about it. We get several scenes.
Right. We just don't get the joke of it. We get more.
Yeah.
we basically have more jokes, which in this movie is more scenes.
Right.
So, yeah. And I thought I thought he was great in this.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, like, I've literally only ever seen him in one other thing, which is Blazing Saddles, where again, like, it's one of my favorite roles of that movie, but it's not this. I mean, that's obviously just like a very jokey, the whole Mongo Candygram thing. But again, he stands out in that film, and he stands out here because, again, he's not a stereotype at all. And him and Robert Preston have like kind of a beautiful little relationship that starts to take hold. And I wasn't expecting it. It actually took me by surprise when he's like, if you can, when he tells James Garner, he's like, well, if you can be gay, then I just want you to know I'm gay. And I was like, oh my God, what? And again, like, as someone who is gay and looks and always wants representation to be there, but not in a way that's, going to make the grand majority of the group upset. I think this movie does a pretty good job at, again, speaking to experiences, but not making every gay character a stereotype, because like most of the characters in this movie, like half of them are gay, essentially.
Yeah.
And none of them are played for like, again, like there's not any really big stereotypical, the stereotypes are the ways that the straight characters act, if anything.
Yeah.
Like James Garner's character, and then definitely his like business partner, played by Norman Chancellor, the Sal Andretti character, like, I mean, obviously, big time.
Well, he's just playing,
right,
gangster bigot,
gruff Italian gangster bigot.
He's just playing. Oh, we need some physical threat in this movie one more time.
Right, which like I what's funny is like all of the exterior threats feel completely unnecessary and don't add anything to the story.
Absolutely, you could do this whole movie and still have emotional threats of her relationship with James Garner threatening her fame and her relationship with Robert Preston, because if the fame goes away, where does the relationship stand?
Right.
And, and so that's the emotional story of the movie. And I think that's where Blake Edwards kind of sort of traditionally built up these beautiful, beautiful, incredible movies that were funny and fun and groundbreaking. And then the moment they should become just phenomenally beautiful movies, he's throwing in we're going to hire a crazy detective, and the detective's is going to get hit by lightning, and you're like, what? Why? Stop! You don't have to Pink Panther this. I know it was the most successful thing you ever did, and you'll live on it forever and ever and ever. And it was hugely successful, but those can stay in the Pink Panther. But
yeah.
That said, it's coming from a tradition. Like the movie has the original movie has some of those elements as well. It's a very 30s movie element, which is we have this great drama going on, and we also have this weird, very farcical and like Home Alone level of comedy.
It's not great. Like and the fact that we have James Garner do it, and then we also have the detective do it, it didn't really work when James Garner did it. I mean, I guess it worked more because, again, he's one of the main characters, and like this makes more narrative sense. But like It does. I mean, it just makes his character kind of out to be a creep, which is fine. Like it is what it is, and I get why they did it that way. But like, there's no way getting around this guy sitting in this closet watching
someone undress. That's none of their business, right? Like,
yeah. Even though they end up getting together at the end of the movie, it still kind of feels icky. Like,
well, yeah, that was 1982 gender politics. That was considered romantic.
I mean, I've seen Revenge of the Nerds. That movie has some really, really questionable sexual politics as well. So I know that it's just, that was just passed off as no problem. So here I understand it's just like you said, that is just what it is. But and it would have passed off because listen, and James Garner is coming in with the Rockford Files and the Maverick. So I love that they cast James Garner in this and then make him sit there and be attracted to a woman that then he finds out is a man and has to sort of live with that for the rest of the movie. Right.
Because it is damaging to a machismo male psyche.
Especially during the 30s.
30s. And 80s,
right?
Which
right.
Apparently, were very similar. But James Garner's always lovely to watch. You just can watch him, and whether he's playing a good guy or a bad guy or a creepy guy in a closet watching someone undress before their bath, he's still great to watch.
Again, that last one may be a step too far, but I agree with you.
And it only would have worked if they hadn't let him see. Like, I think he would have gotten away with it if he goes in and then comedy circumstances means he's got to get out before he can see. Right. Or something happens that keeps him from seeing. She does the bath, and he's like, actually, and then Robert Preston goes into the bath instead. Like, it just feels like, God, you could have done so much more, and then he's got to get out of there, and he doesn't know. He still doesn't know. It would have been so much more fun to watch him struggle with feelings of attractiveness for someone whose gender he was not sure about. And that is the beautiful moments in this movie when in the early parts of the Julie Andrews James Garner relationship. And and some of that fun is let out of the balloon when he knows, or at least they allude that he knows.
Right.
That said, this is so much fun. I really enjoyed watching it again, and I love the musical numbers. I think they're just really wonderful.
Oh yeah, that's the thing. I mean, outside of kind of the sexual politics of the movie, I feel like the set design is fantastic. The costume design is fantastic. The musical numbers are great. I think that some of them feel very samey to one another, but I get why they needed to be, because again, we're kind of in a very specific corner of the world, and most, if not all of the musical numbers are, I guess, diegetic too, because we're seeing them in the world. It's not a musical number where the characters just break into song. We're seeing the musical numbers as they're being presented on stage. There's never anything outside of that. So it's a
performance musical.
Right. Yeah. Which, I mean, again, right, well, it suits the narrative, obviously, because again, we have a woman playing a man who's playing a woman, which, I mean, shades of Robert Downey Jr. in Tropic Thunder. I'm the dude portraying the dude disguised as another dude. It's that same idea of like, Julie Andrews is doing most of the heavy lifting here, because what the expectation for her role is, I think she does a really good job at portraying the Count Victor Grzinski character, the male character portraying a female character. I mean, I've never looked at Julie Andrews and thought, androgynous? And like, it's interesting because like, I guess I kind of see it. I don't know. Not that I'm saying I needed a more androgynous actor to play the role, but Julie Andrews is very feminine, even when she's trying to be the Count Victor Grzinski character. And I don't know, I just found it a little interesting because in my mind, the James Garner character, I don't know if he really should have and would have been tricked that she's a man. I have a hard time believing that's just, again, that's like a me problem, not a movie problem.
Well, and I think that is the 30s. So right. If you go back to the 30s of it all, and they did this in Paris, but even in the original movie, the girl that plays Victoria doesn't seem particularly masculine either. Right. Like, but nobody does. Everybody in the 30s in 30s movies could almost be non-binary.
Right.
Often. The guy doesn't seem as James Garner as in that movie. He's much sweeter, and the guy that sort of has her do that is like a boyfriend or something. Like, he's not a gay guy necessarily, from what I could tell. And again, I don't. But it it was just so interesting because, again, I think you have to recognize that audiences walked into movies with so much expectation of the stars in them,
Right.
and a lot of awareness in a way that we don't know stars the same way. We don't know them as stars the same way, right?
Right.
They're all on Twitter. So even if they're stars and we think we know them, we also
Demystified.
they're demystified. They were not demystified in 1982. Robert Preston was a huge star. Julie Andrews was a huger star. She had done The Sound of Music. She had done Mary Poppins.
Right.
And so you have Mary Poppins playing a woman, playing a guy, playing a woman. And that's like, some people lost their minds just with the idea of that, I think.
Right.
And so just those short hair, which, she had most of her life, a sort of a short haircut, which was very unusual for a star, I thought, for the time. But I don't know. I haven't done a thing. But the costumes, I want to go back to the production design of the costumes because it is friggin' brilliant.
Yeah.
And the costume designer was Patricia Norris, who was nominated 6 times for Academy Award for Best Costume, for everything from Days of Heaven to The Elephant Man to Victor Victoria, and then I think one of her latest movies was 12 Years a Slave. But
nice.
One of the because I was like going and trying to look up some things I didn't know about the movie. And one of the things I found, and I don't know how true it is, but it was that the costume worn by Julie Andrews in The Shady Dame from Seville, which is the big sort of Spanish production number, that then to spoil it, at the end, Robert Preston performs that number. It's the same costume. It was built for Robert Preston, and then they penned it for Julie Andrews. And I just think that's just such a great touch that is in some ways unnecessary and yet also makes it lovely. And apparently, he the now ripped costume is somewhere. Like it's in a collection of costumes, still with the rips and tears from when Robert Preston wore it and kind of tears it apart during his performance.
I read the same thing as well. Well, and you mentioned the musical numbers. I mean, again, what they are and the way that they're presented, it's like I can see why this would work so well on stage as well, because again, you can just have essentially everything stop and just have the audience watching these musical numbers being presented on a stage the way they're being presented in the musical. And I mean, again, I appreciate that about this because performance musicals are not something I've seen a whole hell of a lot of. I'm trying to think, I've seen this one.
I guess like Singing in the Rain is both.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to say like Rock of Ages has some of that. Yeah. I mean, again, that's more of a jukebox musical. But yeah, I think for the most part, and I guess Hedwig as well. Hedwig and the Angry Inch has some I mean, there's I think probably half the musical numbers in that movie are performance, or at least meant to.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I like it as kind of a conceit. And again, having seen so many, and that's the thing. I mean, you and I did a couple we did one Indian movie. And it probably won't air until next year at this point. But I feel like I've been watching a lot of musicals anyways, because I've seen so many Indian movies. And again, like in most of the Indian movies, if not all the ones that I've seen, they are not presented as I guess performance musical numbers. But in some of the movies there have been, and they're not like on stage as much as they're like at a party and everybody kind of stops and has these kind of big musical numbers at a party together. So it's interesting to again see this and it kind of being like, we're seeing the action on stage and then we're just cutting away to like Robert Preston and John Rhys Davies and a reaction shot. And then like
reacting. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, again, like it's sidelining the characters, but because Julie Andrews is so entertaining, that's perfectly fine. But that is the one thing about performance musicals that I do think is a little bit of a weak point or a failing, but it's just because the way the narrative's presented is unless you have those characters on stage together performing, it's never really like
there's no story being put forward. There's no story.
And we really never get to see Robert Preston and Julie Andrews perform but one time. That's really it.
And that's so delightful though. But it's really great. It's really great.
I wanted more of it is kind of the problem. Like I liked the two of them together so much that I wish there was more of that. And again, if it were a more traditional musical, there totally would be. There would be songs. There would be a song that they would sing together in the apartment when he's getting her ready to be Victor. And like you could
How
see
do you
that.
be a man?
Right, exactly. And like it's a real shortcoming of the movie and just the musical as a whole, because again, like
I wouldn't call it a musical. I mean,
Right.
Even though it's technically a musical comedy because it has many musical production numbers, the musical production numbers are integral to the plot only in that she is a singing star, right?
Right.
So
she's a massive successful star.
and it takes place in a nightclub with, stage and music. So it's not a musical in the sense of normal people are going to break out singing.
Right.
James Garner does not have an 11 o'clock number about understanding his sexual attractions.
Kind of disappointed there wasn't really. Am I gay? Am I gay? I mean, again,
I don't
like
know what
right.
way.
Yeah, like I mean, that's for me. That's the thing. It's like I missed those moments because of the way the musical's narrative is. And again, like you said, it in a lot of ways it really isn't a musical. Like it's those musical numbers. You could have had all of that shot from stage left or stage right and just seeing it happening and never actually see, and just have her come off stage and there you go. And it's like, oh, that was a great number. And like in a movie where the musical numbers aren't as important, that's how they would have done it. They just didn't do that here because, again, you have Julie Andrews and you're adapting something that already has musical numbers. So why wouldn't you do it? But yeah, that for me is kind of the one other big thing here. Is just I wish more characters got in on the musical numbers. And I don't know. I mean, God, if James Garner started singing, maybe I would take that wish back. Be careful what you wish for.
Yeah, I don't think that James Garner would sing.
I mean, I've heard Pierce Brosnan singing in Mamma Mia, and it leaves a lot to be desired. So I guess maybe, lucky us, we didn't see James Garner singing, but at the same time, like, I don't know how much they would have asked him to do. So again, who knows, right?
I'd be very curious. I've not seen the theatrical adaptation, and it's always interesting when a movie goes to the stage, particularly before, now it's not that unusual. But it took a long time, right? It didn't become a stage musical until like the early 90s.
Right.
So I think it took a long time to figure out how to turn it into a proper musical, right?
Yeah.
Because you need the story and the music to be integrated for it to, I think, to be a proper musical. It doesn't need to be completely integrated, but you need to have those numbers, or it doesn't feel like you can sit there and watch 12 performance songs or 14 performance songs. You can get away with a couple of those, and then the rest of the songs need to be me telling you my deep dark secrets and you professing your love, or you professing your fears, or
Right.
us explaining the trouble that we're in. Because it's much more akin to movies of the 30s and 40s that were just like, and here we are in the nightclub, and then there's just performances in the nightclub, because that was the fact that it's set in the 30s. It also is a nod to those films from the 30s and 40s and 50s, where you always had production numbers in there that were not necessarily integral to the piece, but it was a way to like basically sort of let audiences see a great singer.
Right.
So they would literally stop the movie in order to be like, and now, there's a whole production number while we're, waiting for, Abbott and Costello to watch next or something.
Right.
It was less Abbott Costello. Who am I thinking of that it would always be? It was Abbott and Costello movies that they would have production numbers in.
Right.
Anyway.
Well, and to go and look at the musical, I mean, the stage musical that you're talking about, the stage musical version of Victor Victoria does have songs with King and Victoria. And King has his own song even. And Victor and Norma have a song together. And there's none of that in the movie.
Yeah.
And there is a version that you can check out on iTunes that is a filmed version of the stage musical.
Okay.
And again, like I looked at some of it, and again, it's like, this is kind of not the same thing, because like we've already mentioned, there are some of the same songs that show up, but there is a song called If I Were a Man. So it's that thing of like, again, like you have to do that when it's an actual musical. This is kind of splitting the difference, as it were. And it's not a bad thing. It's just, it kind of feels like if you're going to do this, you need to do more. There does need to be more, because some of the stuff in the second and third act, I feel like get rid of that stuff and give us some more musical numbers. Like, give us those musical numbers that we're missing, because the back and forth with Sal and King in the hotel suite, like that's like unnecessary additions to this movie to add tension where it doesn't need to be there. The sexual and gender politics of the time should be tension filled enough that James Garner doesn't want to go out with Victor because he's concerned about being seen as, a gay man, even though he's not a gay man, even though he's, again, visibly a gay man, outwardly presenting as someone who's gay. So again, it would have fleshed I want the characters to be fleshed out more, not having unnecessary villainous characters added in because why? It doesn't go anywhere. Like it literally goes nowhere and is wrapped up as quickly as it's introduced.
Exactly. It's like, well, yeah. So
right.
It's a weird place to put the story, right? It's a weird place to hang the story, but it and then when you think though, no, it really is all about men's feelings, even if
right.
It's not. It's like, well, it has to be under threat of death that she comes clean and saves my life because she's a woman. So it's all okay. We could just drop that storyline now.
And what I don't understand is, like, we literally see Leslie Ann Warren find out that Victor is a woman, and that's the end of the scene. The scene just ends, and it's like,
right,
wait a second. Yeah. Like, what is even the point here? Like, why are we spending any amount of time doing any of this? Like I said, some of the editing in this movie is strange, and the scenes and the way that they just cut away from scenes, it feels like there needed to be a couple more minutes of that scene. There needed to be like 1 or 2 more minutes of something there, because why is it? I mean, okay, so, and then that's it. Then we never see that character again.
And all the threat is gone. Right.
And it's like, why even introduce it to begin with? Because Leslie Ann Warren is kind of a villain. I can't even figure out what her deal is, frankly. Like, she comes and goes in the movie in a really strange way as well. But she's so great. I know. That's the thing, right?
That's the thing. It's like I'm like fine when she comes back, but I did sort of in my mind picture it being like she never leaves. Like she gets off the train somehow and then just comes back and causes trouble. That's how I remember in my head. Not that she goes back to America, calls up all the gangsters, dances for them, gets her own number, and then brings him back to Paris to reveal and get James Garner in trouble. That's a lot of stuff happening when she could have just stayed in Paris and tried to cause trouble, right?
Well, and that's the thing. It's like, I mean, yeah, she goes all the way back to the United States, which there's so little fanfare. And with any of this, it just kind of happens, and then it happens, and then it happens. Like, I don't know, like, again, like, this movie's 2 hours and 15 minutes, and I feel like either you could have cut a half an hour out of it or done something else with that half an hour. Is probably a more impactful way for this movie, is giving those characters those musical numbers that you're going to end up giving them anyways once you adapt this into a stage play 13 years later. Because again, you realize that, as far as I'm concerned, if you're adding musical numbers to this, it's because you realize you needed them, because otherwise this would not work as a stage play the way it's being presented now.
I think the other thing that you have to understand is what stars needed to do things. It was just fun to give, Leslie Ann Warren should have a number because she's amazing. So and so they just decided. I think often the decisions were not so much. It was not a time of carefully crafted structure. Some things it was a time, particularly with a comedy, that you really could throw out structure. Right. And as long as that scene was funny and that scene was funny, people didn't. But I do feel like the first half of this movie is structured very differently than the second half of this movie, and that a lot of the charm of it, which is Robert Preston and Julie Andrews, becomes lost. And yet there is a lot of charm in James Garner and Julie Andrews, and for
not as much though. It's just not as much. Like it's not. I mean, I don't know. I think part of it is because there's no sexual relationship between Robert Preston and Julie Andrews. It's such a asexual relationship, and like I'm not going to say who doesn't want a friend like that, but who wouldn't want a friend like that? Like your closest of close friends that you can literally feel comfortable laying in the same bed with, knowing that they're not going to do anything to you, anything lascivious, but you have such a close friendship with that person, like, and there you go. And like, me personally, I find that relationship a hell of a lot more interesting than, I mean, again, it's just, there are just some missteps with the James Garner character. I don't know if him not seeing her naked would have changed anything, but at least it would have made me think, well, he has some internal struggle there.
Yes.
As opposed to, we kind of see it, but it's such a fucking put on. Like, oh, I'm going to go beat up some guys in a bar. Like, oh God, like this.
But that was definitely how, like, that was how the joke of masculinity was presented in
totally.
American movies. What's interesting too is I think this was, Julie Andrews and James Garner had done the Americanization of Emily, which is an amazing film, and that was much earlier. And so for a lot of, again, the audience that was movie-going audience would have known that. And that's a romance movie. That's a war romance movie that is unlike any other war romance movie. And so I think it's hard to bring in James Garner and Julie Andrews and not. They kind of had too many stars, right?
Right.
So
yeah.
It's like, well, yeah, now that James Garner's walked in, it's going to be really hard for Robert Preston to get as much screen time.
Which is a shame. Like, I don't want to say I didn't like James Garner in this movie. I just kind of wish I kind of wish it was anybody else. Like someone who wasn't competing so much.
No.
I know, I get it, but like if it were someone else, we might not have as little Robert Preston and Julie Andrews in the second and third act. And like, again, because it's James Garner. Like,
listen, when I rewrite this movie, it'll be,
please do.
It'll be about then the triangle, right? So then it'll be my relationship with James Garner threatens both my career and my relationship with my best friend because it threatens my career. Right. And my gay friend threatens James Garner. You would then just focus on the three of them, with the complication being Leslie Ann Warren trying to, get her claws back into James Garner.
Right.
And then discovering that she's not a woman, and then going to tell everybody, and then you can have whatever chaos you want, and so we've solved it. And you don't need those stupid, it was Inspector Clouseau. It was so Pink Panther, the other stuff, and it was unnecessary, and it took time away from the stars.
It did. Oh my God. Yeah. The stuff with the Inspector Clouseau bullshit of this movie is so out of left field. Like, and like you said, I know it's in the original, but like you know what they say. You don't
it's not as broad. It doesn't seem to be as broad. But again, I think it was sort of Blake Edwards was vaudeville in a lot of ways, even though I don't know if he had any relationship to vaudeville, but it was that thing of like, I'm telling a story, but I'm also completely happy to interrupt the story and just do a bit.
Have a guy balancing himself on a champagne bottle.
Yeah. Have a guy put out his shoes and pick up his shoes and put out his shoes and pick up his shoes just for a bit in the hallway.
Yeah. There's some stuff in this that is weird. Like, it's like slapsticky weirdness that it just, again, like, I bet that's not in the stage play. Like, I don't see that being a necessity in the stage play. Because again, you've got the musical numbers. It seems like there's things here that are in the place of what a musical number would be. Like, oh, you're going to spend 2 or 3 minutes having Alex Karras stand outside and freeze. Like, okay, cool, and very entertaining, like, except not. And like, then the gag of like him coming in and being like, oh, they leave your heat on. Like, you spent all that time for that gag? Like,
you spent all that time in that hallway with the shoe guy for that payoff, because that doesn't do it.
Yeah.
And you don't need it. It's so much time. You're like, I just want to see these characters be amazing. And listen, I thought this movie held up. I love this movie. We're nitpicking on the side, the side dishes, but only because for me they interrupt the great parts of this movie.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. It's like a great meal, but you know that what you're eating as the entree, you're just not going to have enough of, and you don't realize that until it's too late. And that's what it feels like. Because like the side plots here just do get in the way of what I was more interested in as an audience member. And as someone who was engaged with the narrative, especially because of how great Julie Andrews and Robert Preston are together. Because again, I think they could have carried the movie just the two of them. I mean, again, not that, again, like, not that you don't need some third thing, because you do need something going on. But it could have just been the two of them, like
trying to get away with this.
Yeah.
Well, and again, because it flits across the gender stuff so interestingly.
Yeah.
But then it just flits across. Like it's so interesting. It starts to get more interesting and more interesting, and then it just sort of stays at the moment of James Garner's character is mildly uncomfortable with himself. And that's the problem of his character.
Right. And it like literally never goes any further than that.
It doesn't. I mean, there's a little bit of like, well, once he knows, then he can't be out in public with Julie Andrews as a man. But Julie Andrews is like, but I'm not giving up my career. And, you know, all those things, again, are very sweet, but they don't take you anywhere.
Right.
And and now and again, I don't know if you could do this now, because we just don't have the same.
I was going to ask you, like, how the fuck would you do this now? Because you've already mentioned non-binary, and as someone who as someone I think in the last year who's come across their own personal journey, and I mean, this is the first time I'm saying it here. I probably consider myself non-binary more than likely at this point. Like, I think that's how you would have to do this is either non-binary or. And again, I don't know how you do this without making people mad. And I'm not a trans woman, but I feel like for this to be a thing, it would have to be a man playing a woman impersonating a man this time? Or would it have to be a man impersonating a woman? Like, I think it would have to be a man who is as a woman, and that would have to be it, right? Like, I don't even know if you could do a woman pretending to be a man, pretending to be a woman. Like, is that going to offend everybody? Like, is that going to even play now? Or does it have to be a man pretending to be a woman? Like, and there's no other subtext to it. And that just has to be like, I'm not and like, but that's the thing. But then you go like, you've literally just disenfranchised the entire trans community. Because I don't know if you can't have the conversation in this movie of, well, I'm not actually a woman. And it's like, oh, Jesus Christ. Like, how about we invalidate an entire group of people's feelings by accident or intentionally? I mean, again, if you went into making this now, I feel like it is a losing battle.
It's a little bit like making broadcast news. Like, I don't know, you probably don't know this movie, Holly Hunter.
I do not.
Broadcast News was James L. Brooks' huge hit, and it was amazing. And it's about video news. Right. And newscasters and ethics in video television news.
Oh, what an idea, huh?
And the tension of trying to get, literally one of the best scenes in the movie is trying to get this last minute edited tape of a news story finished cutting to get it on air at the time they needed to before the news broadcast is over. That's a huge, dramatic and funny scene and sequence in this movie that literally does not make any sense anymore, except for that time and period in television news, which was when video had come in and before digital would sort of make it a moot exercise.
Right.
The challenges of video news, but also the advantages of video news. And really, more importantly, the ethics in video news of, did you react to that person telling their story in real time? Or did you go back and make yourself react to it and then cut it in?
Right.
That's the emotional climax of the movie, is Holly Hunter going, what? You broke a rule of entertainment, of news journalism.
Riveting. I mean,
and yet,
for the movie, it sounds riveting, but nobody.
For the time, it was an astonishing movie.
Right.
And the performances still hold up, but the story literally makes no sense. You can only look at it as the oh my God, remember when we had to crank, if there was a whole story around having to crank your car to get it to run?
I mean, I joke about Seinfeld all the time, but how many fucking stories in that show have to do with people not being able to, if they had a cell phone? Do you know what I mean? If they had a cell phone, most of the problems of these episodes would be solved more or less immediately, because just be like, hey, I'm down here trying to get a parking spot. Can you come down and help me? And like that, there's a whole episode about parking that has to do with like, and it's like, this is not a thing now. Like, and it feels, again, it feels kind of narratively quaint in a way compared to now. And I think, I mean, to your point, like, I think Victor Victoria, the only way you could do it now is if you just set it in the 30s. So you have to take advantage of what they were doing in 82, which is, again, it is the 30s. So that is why this is a big deal.
So there's a crowd of people that for this, that embrace this culture, and then the rest of the world does not.
Right.
And so that's, but here's the thing. And I don't know that every movie needs to be remade. I think that some movies need to just live where they are. And it, and you can appreciate them where they are. And certainly growing up in the 80s, the ability to put a pen in the male psyche, even if it was a tiny little pinprick hole,
right,
that this movie does,
right,
even at the smallest level, was kind of huge. To have James Garner on screen questioning his own masculinity, quote unquote, because he found himself attracted to someone whose gender became unclear to him. And in particular, after being attracted to them, he discovers that they're a man, sorry. Now I'm getting it wrong. That he discovers them to be a man and thus feels like less of a man and conflicted about the fact that he basically, I guess got excited about a drag queen.
Yeah.
And that he thinks that's what's happened. And that is his whole emotional crisis. And yet that was like where we had to get. We
right.
had to have that in order to, we had to have the tiny pinprick in order to crawl, and then
right.
in order to walk, and then in order to have a pride march.
Well, and that's the thing. It's like, to talk about toxic masculinity, which I think this movie does obviously kind of have somewhat of a discussion about, but I think for the both of us, I don't think it has the discussion enough, but I think it's 82. So the fact that, like you said, they're even doing it the minorest amount is not to be lauded, but it is impressive. The James Garner character, just again, like the way he's played, obviously, is such a toxically masculine guy. But then all of a sudden we're meant to and are supposed to believe that he can change. But I guess by the end of the movie, it kind of becomes Grease, right? Where she does just do what he wants in the end, right?
There is kind of that.
It's kind of unfortunate because, that's what really rankles me about Grease. And I love the Frankie Valli song from the beginning of the movie. It is absolutely a fantastic song. And Grease, the musical, I understand the appeal. But I will say the same thing I said when I did an episode on it almost 10 years ago, which is I do not understand the end of that movie being anything other than a complete and utter rejection of the idea that it is okay for you to be you in spite of what your partner wants. And Grease ends with literally, "How you doing, stud?" And it's like, oh no, this doesn't work. This is really awkward. And this movie has that same moment at the end where Julie Andrews comes out looking like Victoria. And I go, okay, so that's what's going to happen now. And that is what happens at the end of this movie, because the implication is that she is now done as Count Victor Krasinski, right?
Yeah.
And that's it. And it literally just ends without any fanfare. And it's more or less played for a penis gag that they saw Robert Preston's penis, right? It's like, that would be the greatest disguise I've ever seen. And it's
right.
like, I'm assuming the implication is that guy walked in there and saw Robert Preston naked. Like,
yes.
And saw his literal biological male genitalia. But is anybody actually believe that guy is... But I have a hard time understanding the end of this movie, because what happens? Do they actually believe that is it's insanity? Frankly,
it's not. See, here's the thing, and you weren't able to rewatch these movies every moment of every day.
Right.
They weren't available readily, but it was just a movie.
I know.
If you enjoyed yourself through the whole ride, you didn't really need to explain too much.
Right.
You didn't need to explain how the guy was struck by lightning and his umbrella caught.
Yeah. Again, yeah, it's some slapstick nonsense.
It is not for and it's not fair necessarily. It's asking it's asking the Marx Brothers to start to explain their behavior at college.
Well, at risk of being called, the millennial or whatever the fuck, I stand by that. Again, like call me a big, a big SJW or whatever, however you want to interpret it. But like for social justice warrior.
Oh, okay.
Like for me, it's just like, again, I would prefer my movies that are trending in this direction continue to trend that direction all the way through, not pulling up right at the last second and being like, but no, all the good things we've done in this movie, we can just kind of undo them by having
just back to zero.
Yeah, it's like
she's
a sitcom.
no longer a star.
Yeah,
and she'll be with James Garner, and
just wanted to marry a rich man,
gangster man.
Yeah,
and
it kind of robs the movie of its of any emotional weight.
I'm curious if they solved it. Like, how do you? The solve would be on stage to come clean.
Right. Oh, one. I mean, that is what I was expecting. That was my expectation. The way I had said it was, in my mind, this had to end with her revealing herself as Victoria on stage and everybody going, whoa. But again, at the same time, like not really caring because she's still immensely talented. That is never in question. And she's immensely talented if she's Victor or Victoria. Just because, the nightclub owner, was it played by Peter Arne Labisse, the guy from the beginning of the movie? Just because he doesn't have any interest in her act doesn't mean she's not talented, because it's been made clear that she's immensely talented. And what I don't understand is, why did she have to stop? If not for James Garner's fragile masculine facade not being able to take it. And that, I mean, again, if you were to remake this movie, part of this would be looking at his character as a little bit and really deconstructing that toxic masculine like fragility that he really like expresses throughout the movie. And you see Alex Karras's character as a counterpoint to that, because once he comes out, all of a sudden it's again like there is now an actual gay character for him to talk to, and he does have those conversations, and those conversations with Alex Karras are really good. I like that conversation where he's asking him, like, talking about the time of football, and he's like, well, I had to over
compensate.
Yeah. And it's like, you know what? I mean, I know people like that. I knew people like that in high school. In some respects, I probably did that myself. But I mean, I never worried about it as much as someone like this would have at this time. I mean, again, growing up in the 90s and 2000s, even then it was more acceptable. I mean, it's a lot more acceptable now, thank God, as if it ever shouldn't have been to begin with. But there was so much more potential here. And if this was ever redone, he would be a much bigger character.
And their relationship would shift. And that, like, you could literally have you could keep them, you could just keep it in the mix of the relationship between the four of them. And with Leslie Ann Warren being I'm going to try to mix it up.
Right.
Because and then her discovering something that would be fun.
Right. There are so many opportunities the movie doesn't take. And it's, again, for whatever reason, I feel like I know why they didn't take those, because the thing, like we mentioned, the thing that is the big selling point of this movie is Julie Andrews and James Garner, not Julie Andrews and Robert Preston, which for me ends up taking precedent over everything else. And I also think, as much as I'm not, as I know you aren't any more than I am, a Academy person and Academy Awards and all that nonsense, like, this movie got nominated for 7 awards and Robert Preston was nominated for one of them. And rightfully so, because he really is, for me, the standout of the movie. As much as everyone else is fantastic, Robert Preston for me is the true standout.
Yeah, he's absolutely delightful to watch.
Yeah.
And you want them to get together and you want them to win, him and Julie Andrews, and you want them to pull this off. And if you were going to redo this, you would have to now just do a better job with structure on it.
Right.
I mean, I don't know how you deal with whatever the sexual politics are, but the emotional politics are something that you would want to address. You would want to make sure that the story kind of stays about she and Robert Preston and what the challenges of James Garner adding into that mix and then James Garner's learning about both himself and Julie Andrews and Robert Preston and his bodyguard.
Right.
And that's so much. That's plenty for a movie. You don't need that. You would just cut all that other stuff.
Right.
But for comedy, for this, like, I I think so much of movies at that point, and particularly filmmakers who were making comedies, it was just what's funnier. You got to have the funny. You got to deliver the funny. If the funny's not in that scene, then you just bring in the crazy hired detective and do something awful to them,
right.
and that'll be funny. And then we can move on.
Yeah, and that like that old school filmmaking sensibility. Like the addition of those comedy slapsticky moments. It's not that they're not welcome, but just it doesn't. It for me, I feel like there are other better, more interesting ways to entertain your audience in this movie. And slapstick is fine, but I mean, Robert Preston has plenty of funny lines, like really well thought out, nice retorts to people, and just the characterization of his character is so like well thought out and fully realized that like you said, I don't need to see a guy getting struck by lightning. Frankly, just giving Robert Preston pithy things to say is plenty.
And having Robert Preston and Julie Andrews' relationship be in jeopardy because she can't keep this up. And then the joke is she can't keep this up. You don't want a career necessarily doing that as not yourself. Like there's so much more to mine from her character of like, the only way to sort of do it is not like, I want to stop doing this for you. It's like, well, I'd like to perform as myself and have people love me for that rather than, oh my gosh, she can sing so high and she's a man.
Right.
Like, it's like, I can sing high. Can't that be impressive as a woman?
Well, that's why I mean, like, if this were redone, like, part of it would be like, you have to have that taken care of in a more interesting way. And I think that is it for me. Like, the struggle is internal for Julie Andrews' character, not external. And frankly, if it were me, the way I would end it is she tacitly rejects King Marchand and just goes off with Robert Preston, and they just do their act together. And it's less about the relationship, a sexual or, love, intimate relationship between her and King Marchand, but more about a not atypical, but like a less typical relationship between these two characters that I think is much more interesting to mine than, again, a very fragile, toxic man coming to terms with what it means to be a toxic man. Like,
but he did. I have to say, I don't want them just to not, like, I want everyone to win. I want everyone to win.
Sure.
Everyone. But I think it's just a time when it was just it was a Mel Brooks time. It was all these guys were coming off this vaudeville idea of sort of just chaos in movies was sort of a thing. So it's sort of Blake Edwards made movies that were better than in some ways maybe on paper they had any right to be. But he continued to do that with very interesting stuff, and particularly with Julie Andrews. And they were married, and so it's just an interesting when you're directing, your wife in this movie.
Right.
But anyway, I just thoroughly enjoyed it.
Same. No, and I think, again, like we've kind of mentioned, like the standouts are obvious. This is a musical that I had never seen, and I'm glad I've seen it. Again, it allowed me to kind of enjoy Julie Andrews in a way that I think is more typical of what she is known for, versus, having seen The Princess Diaries, which is not bad, but again, it's what some people my age know her from. But again, having never seen Sound of Music.
But I think The Sound of Music is a beautiful musical. B, it is anti-Nazi. Now, there's a couple of Nazis in it, but it's anti-Nazi.
Right. Oh,
Julie Andrews is not a Nazi.
I don't think it's pro-Nazi. I'm just saying it's just
up the Nazi flag. It's the meme. It's the GIF. Come on.
Okay. Okay.
And it's just beautiful music and beautiful. It's very romantic, and it's sort of insane. Like she's a nun who gets sent away because she's too much trouble. Because I mean, look, to fall in love. Come on.
For me, like, again, like, and this is probably where I want to end this episode. What is your favorite musical? Film musical, not stage.
No.
But what is your favorite filmed musical? And why isn't it Cats 2019?
That is an excellent question, Chris. There's an excellent question.
It's a true question that I want to know the answer to, Susan. Why don't you love Cats 2019 as much as I do?
Oh God, my favorite film musical. It's almost impossible to say that. I would just do a long string of all the musicals that I love.
That's fair. That's fair.
So, but it because of I loved Hedwig. I love Little Shop of Horrors. I love Sound of Music. And everything in between.
You've talked about Oklahoma a lot with me as well.
Yes. Well, that I think part of it is also some of the musicals that you experience at an early age become your favorite musical. It's like Jackie Chan movies or something. So you're like, what? This can exist in the world?
Yeah.
And
I saw Cats when I was like 9 because I got the VHS. I asked for that VHS of the stage production for my birthday. So I remember like that. And that's why Cats resonates with me. Unfortunately, we have to deal with Cats 2019 because of that. But I mean, again, like I get it. Like you see these things at a formative time and they make a very big impression on you if they resonate with you. And, like I said, Cats was one of them. Rocky Horror was another one for me that I saw at the right age, at the perfect age, one might even say it. And also Sweeney Todd. So
I think it's kind of whatever musical you see at Wizard of Oz, so those, but I I have a soft spot for a lot of musicals. There are other musicals that everybody loves, and I don't.
Oh, okay,
I
want to hear that.
Cats is not a favorite musical.
That's fair.
Rent is not a favorite musical.
Same here. I actually really don't like Rent. I find it to be kind of maudlin to the point of like it's just like it's almost like it's like a stress test to watch that. Like, how much can you really deal with all of this? Because it's just a little much.
And there's one good song.
I want to know what else you're not a fan of, because maybe like that's maybe a more interesting question. Like what else are you not a fan of that are really big musicals? Because like I said, I'm not a fan of Grease. And like,
here's the thing: Grease is a great musical, but the storyline it's crap, right?
Yeah,
like
it's real bad.
It's bad. It's bad sexual politics for sure.
Yeah, for the time and now.
For the 50s, the 70s, and now. But the music is so much fun, and the musical numbers are so much fun that you sort of
Grease
forget.
Lightning.
Yeah, come on.
Yeah,
great.
Yeah. I saw Les Mis recently, the filmed version,
which I have not seen. Yeah,
I found it to be like it's fine. It's just so overwhelmingly depressing that it's like I don't know. There was never a moment where I was like, "Is this supposed to be fun?" Because this is just like constant. Like, we are poor and we're hungry, and that's 2.5 hours of this, and it's like, oh my god, like okay, I don't know. Like I maybe again, like I know how important Les Mis was at the time and how big of a deal it was, but okay,
yeah. The musicals that tend toward opera, I don't tend to love as much because I like some opera, but I'm not a big opera person. I like the scrappier musicals for sure.
Same.
But speaking of musicals, I will say the music in this again I really enjoyed, and it's Henry Mancini for the music, but the lyrics are Leslie Bricusse, who I know of both from Scrooge, the musical movie, but also because he wrote the lyrics to It's a Living, the television show theme song. So I was like, I recognize that name.
Also did music wrote the song Goldfinger.
Yes, I mean he wrote a lot. He wrote Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory.
You Only Live Twice as well. I mean, two of like the great James Bond themes. I mean, I think Goldfinger is the great James Bond theme song. Like that's the one that I think everybody knows. But Leslie Bricusse, like a lot. I mean, a lot of the credit is goes to them for sure.
Yeah, and he also wrote the lyrics to "Can You Read My Mind," the love theme from Superman, the greatest love theme from a comic book movie ever. I'm just going to say.
Never seen Superman.
Throw it down.
I know.
It's okay.
I know.
And again, it that one you're definitely going to have to take your special effects hat and.
Oh, I know.
There.
I am sick of CGI. So there is nothing that there's nothing that practical effects can do at this point to sour me as much as CGI has soured me in the last couple years on CGI in general. So give me a terrible practical effect. I will appreciate it a lot more than terrible CGI. Because like
Christopher Reeve will be my forever Superman, and I love him more now than I did when he came out. When it came out, I was like, it's a little too, and now every time I watch that I'm sold on.
But beyond the first one, are you a fan of anything beyond the first one? Because I know that after the first one, it gets dodgy, right?
Not too much after the first one. Yeah.
Not the one with Richard Pryor where they have to save. Is that the Save the Environment movie?
Yeah, there's the one. Yeah, yeah.
right.
They're
That's kind of why I never watched him, because I was like, I'll just watch the first one.
You just watch the first one. You just need to watch the first one.
Yeah,
it's Margot Kidder. It's Christopher Reeve. It's
Gene Hackman, right?
It's Gene Hackman. It's it's a well done movie. It's a well done movie.
I'll watch it eventually.
Okay, well,
to add it to that long list.
Add
of
it
things.
to that list. But I'm telling you, we got to do some. We got to do Sound of Music. I want to do Sound of Music.
Okay, fair. I mean, again, I'll watch it. I am never going to say no unless it's like I wouldn't say no to anything. So that's me. That's my toxic trait. I refuse to say no to things. So we could do that. Sure, why not? But final thoughts on Victor Victoria, Susan.
Totally well worth a rewatch or a first watch if you've never seen it, and absolutely don't. As a 1982 movie, pretty amazing.
Yeah, I would agree. You were really excited to talk about this, and I understand why now. The music is fun. The performances are great. Some things haven't aged well, but again, I think any movie that's taking on what this movie was taking on in 82, that's the risk you run, and that's what happens. And it's okay, because it's more admirable to even go this direction than it is to not. And did they land it perfectly? No, but at least they didn't crash into the side of a mountain and all burn in a fire. So again, it's a lot more successful than I would have thought something this progressive could be at the time, or should be. And yeah, I mean, thank you so much for programming this one, because again, I enjoyed it. I mean, the music's great, and I kind of want to watch Music Man now just because of Robert Preston. Like
Robert Preston and the Music Man is pretty freaking great.
Yeah.
Here's the thing about Robert Preston. He can't sing worth a lick.
No, that's pretty obvious.
But somehow he managed a career as a musical man.
Yeah. Well, and that's the funny thing. Like you said, like he's really not singing in this. Like he's not singing, not the way that you would expect. And but it totally works. And, and that's the thing. It's like everything about this movie for me works for the most part. The things that are really work. So no, again, thank you so much for bringing this one to the show, because I enjoyed it a lot. I don't know if I'm going to like Sound of Music as much, but at least,
it's a very different movie.
Yeah,
I think we got to do it. I'm curious. It's been a while since I saw it. It's a very different movie, but that music, and she is just something else.
I mean, I'm on board if it's Julie Andrews, because she's fantastic.
And Christopher Plummer is pretty dreamy.
Well, and that's the other thing. I know he's in it. So, and I'm a huge Christopher Plummer fan.
Then come on.
Right. Like, yeah. I mean, it's again, not for a lack of having no reason to watch it. It's just, I've never gotten around to it. So.
Oh, well, you got to get around to it.
Yeah.
It's, look at you right here.
Hi, I'm Susan.
And I'm Sharon. And we're the hosts of 80s TV Ladies.
Check us out wherever you find your favorite podcasts.
And please like and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at 80s TV Ladies.
You can find interviews and exclusive behind-the-scenes content on all of your favorite 80s TV ladies.
80s TV Ladies is the place to go. Please join us.
Hi, this is HP from Noise Junkies.
And this is Father Malone from Dark Destinations.
Please join us as we examine one of the greatest sitcoms in television history, Taxi, on Night Mr. Walters, a Taxi podcast.
Good night, Mr. Walters.
Good evening, and welcome to Night Gallery.
Thank you, Rod. And I want to welcome everyone to Midnight Viewing, where once a month we talk all about your follow-up to The Twilight Zone, Rod Serling's Night Gallery.
They say it's Rod Serling's Night Gallery, and it isn't really Rod Serling's Night Gallery. It's somebody else's.
Oh, we know. We talk about it a lot. Your curators at Midnight Viewing are the projection booth's Mike White.
What can happen to human beings when trust is wiped out by suspicion?
And CultureCast's Chris Stashew.
Small boy encased in a crystal ball.
And I'm Father Malone.
The kind of thing that usually infests nightmares.
Join us monthly at midnight viewing the Night Gallery podcast at weirdingwaymedia.com.
Doesn't remotely belong to me. I have no proprietary interest in that at all.
So, Susan, when you're not here joining me, where can people find you and the things that you work on?
Why, they can find me and my co-host Sharon at 80s TV Ladies, hosted on the Weirding Way Media Network, your network. And they can find me at SusanLambertHaddam.com. And Susan Lambert on almost all the social medias.
Still on X, huh?
I'm on Twitter. I'm not on X. I'm on Twitter.
I wish
that's how I roll.
Fair. I mean, at some point, none of us will be on any of it. So
I'm hoping that somehow come like November 10th, 2024, he'll just sell it as a loss or go bankrupt. And that ultimately, my big dream for Twitter is that it become a public utility.
You've said that every time we bring this up. And I kind of agree more and more. I'm
just going to keep saying it until it becomes truth, right? We should have free public transportation, and we should have free public services for digital, and we should have a free public social media, and Twitter could be it.
Or I like the idea more of it just being owned by a real-life Bond villain.
No, I don't. I think we tried that.
Yeah, right. It hadn't worked out so well for everybody.
And they're not even Bond villains anymore, because those Bond villains would want $1 million.
Yeah.
These guys are like, they've got $5 billion, and they're deeply, deeply unwell and unhappy. It's terrible for you. You should be taxed. There should be no billions. It's very bad for your health.
Speaking of toxic masculinity.
Yes.
And people overcompensating for things. Boy, that right there, just all of them, put them in one big boat together and send them to overcompensation island.
We can help them a lot. I feel bad for them. They should be taxed so that they know what it feels like to be human again.
Right.
It's good for them.
It's good. Yeah, it's good. It's good to feel like a human being.
Yeah. And then you have to, they'd like pulling themselves up by their bootstraps. They miss it. They want it again.
This is what they wanted. They talk about it all the time.
They want it.
Yeah. As for me, you can find me at weirdingwaymedia.com, where all the things that I work on are available. But, a lot of things that I don't work on, which I think are just as important, if not more important, like Twisted and Uncorked, or The Feminine Critique, or like you mentioned, your show, which is fantastic and has won awards, which, is awesome. And I'm so proud of that. weirdingwaymedia.com is where you can find all that. And then patreon.com/culturecast is where you can go to get in on supporting the show financially. And if you're really into the show and you're really into James Bond and you want to hear Richard, Susan is Richard's better half, not the other way around. If you want to hear the Projection Booth's Mike White ranking on Bond, or ranking on Bass, I guess, is Richard Haddam and myself talk about all the James Bond movies, $10 a month will get you that. And you can find that over at patreon.com/culturecast. So, Susan, again, thank you so much for joining me.
I'm so happy to join you. Thank you for having me. And I highly recommend the Bond series.
Yeah, and you're going to be on it at some point, because
I am, because you need a little girl, little girl power.
Yeah, 3 white guys talking about James Bond, even if one of us is gay, that's not good enough, because there are enough white guys talking about stuff on the internet to fill a lot of boats to the bottom of the ocean. So, someone, myself included. So,
listen, we all need to have a voice in the world.
It's true. So, on that note, we'll catch you on the next episode.